Hi, I'm Karen McGee, a certified RTT hypnotherapist, and I specialize in helping people with ADHD overcome the emotional and mental blocks that hold them back. Whether it's task paralysis, emotional overwhelm, or struggling to sleep, I help you get unstuck and take back control using powerful evidence based hypnotherapy techniques that can create a real lasting change. But I don't just work with ADHD, I also help clients with anxiety, social anxiety, confidence issues, phobias, relationships, challenges, and more. If you're ready to stop spinning your wheels and start feeling like yourself again, I'd love to help. Book a free discovery call today and let's talk about how I can support you. You don't have to do this alone. Check out my website, elevatedbeliefs.com, for a more comprehensive list of services that I provide. Thank you.
Okay, think about this for a sec. Imagine your brain's emotional filters are, I don't know, like a sieve, but one with holes just way too big. So every little drop of criticism, maybe even just a hint of disapproval, it just hits you full force, unfiltered. And it's agonizing, right?
Yeah, absolutely agonizing.
Do you, or maybe someone you know, have these incredibly intense emotional reactions, even to really minor stuff? Does hearing no, or just sensing someone's not thrilled, send you into this spiral, one that
Yeah.
actually feels physical, like a punch to the gut or this deep ache inside?
It's such a profound feeling, and it's really common, especially for people with ADHD, but it's also profoundly misunderstood.
Absolutely. So today, that's what we're digging into, rejection sensitive dysphoria,
Yeah.
or RSD. It's this really powerful emotional experience, deeply tied to ADHD, but like you said, often missed in the standard picture of ADHD. Our mission really in this deep dive is to unpack why that emotional sieve might have such big holes for some people. What happens when emotions hit with that kind of raw intensity? And maybe most importantly, how can you find a finer mesh, for yourself or maybe for someone you care about?
Yeah, finding those strategies is key.
We'll try to separate it from some other conditions it gets confused with and really equip you with practical tools, practical insights, things you can actually use to navigate these moments that feel, well, unbearable. So get ready for a shortcut to understanding something that really resonates with so many people.
Sounds good.
So let's start right there. You're using this term, RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria. But what is it exactly? Is it something, you get formally diagnosed with?
That's a really important question to start with. Right now, RSD isn't a standalone diagnosis in the official manuals like the DSM-5. It's actually a term that was first coined by Dr. William Dodson.
Ah, Dodson, right?
Yeah. He used it to describe this very real, recognized pattern of symptoms that a lot of people with ADHD strongly identify with. So even though it doesn't have its own diagnostic code,
Gotcha.
the experience itself is absolutely real and it's profoundly impactful for the people living with it.
And that word dysphoria in the name, it really hammers home the intensity, doesn't it? Can you break that down? Why use that specific word, meaning unbearable? What makes it different from just, feeling bummed out or disappointed?
Yeah, unbearable is the key. That's where the definition really hits home. Like you said, dysphoria is Greek for unbearable. So rejection-sensitive dysphoria is this extreme emotional response, this really intense pain to rejection, criticism, or failure. And crucially, it can be perceived rejection, not just actual rejection.
So even if it wasn't meant that way.
Exactly. People don't just feel sad. They often describe it as a literal physical sensation. You mentioned it earlier, like being punched in the chest or stomach or this aching in the core of your being. It's not just a thought pattern. These responses are involuntary. They're overwhelming. They feel like a physical wound.
Wow, a literal punch to the gut. It's almost like your brain is tricking you into thinking it's a physical attack, not just an emotional slight. Is that kind of why it feels so uniquely devastating?
That's a great way to put it. It's not just a bad mood. It's like this primal alarm bell going off, often for something other people might barely register.
Yeah.
I've had patients describe it exactly like that, feeling sucker punched by something invisible. It leaves you winded, confused. It must be incredibly disorienting, that raw bodily feeling.
Definitely. So if it's hitting that hard, how is it so deeply connected to the ADHD brain specifically? Is it just a side effect or is it more core?
It seems to be pretty core. The big shift in understanding here, I think, is realizing ADHD isn't just about attention or hyperactivity. It's not just a focus filter issue. Right. It's more like the brain's emotional volume knob is kind of stuck on high. Your internal stop switch for feelings, the inhibition, isn't working quite right. So every emotion hits with this raw, unfiltered intensity, this heightened emotional sensitivity, this faster reactivity. It seems intrinsically tied to how ADHD brains are wired.
The emotional volume knob stuck on max.
Yeah.
That's a really powerful image. So what's actually happening in the brain wiring that causes that?
Well, fundamentally, ADHD is increasingly understood as a problem of insufficient inhibition. Think about an area deep in the brain called the corpus striatum. It acts like a crucial filter or an emotional traffic controller.
Right.
It's supposed to help manage the massive amount of information, including emotional signals that our brains are constantly processing, input and output. When that inhibition is lacking, emotions are experienced as completely unmodified and unscreened.
Wow.
Yeah, raw is the word many people use. And this leads to feeling overwhelmed by just too much input, too much output. It's exhausting and, frankly, often embarrassing for the person experiencing it.
That makes total sense why these feelings would be so hard to manage. And I understand this emotional dysregulation piece is finally getting more recognition as a core part of ADHD, right? Even if RSD itself isn't the formal diagnosis yet.
Yes, absolutely. It's a really significant and honestly overdue shift. Historically, it was often overlooked in the diagnostic criteria, especially for adults. But now, emotional dysregulation is increasingly recognized as a core ADHD symptom.
That's good to hear.
In fact, the European Union has actually taken a step further. In their updated guidelines, they've included difficulty with emotional regulation as one of the 6 fundamental features for diagnosing ADHD. So there's definitely a growing awareness in the clinical world about how central this is, moving beyond just focus and fidgeting.
Okay, so when this raw emotion, as you called it, hits, how does RSD actually manifest? What are the signs we might look for, in ourselves or maybe in our kids or partners?
The real defining feature is how sudden it is. These episodes often hit out of the blue. They go from 0 to 100% instantaneously, and they feel largely uncontrollable until it's run its course. There's usually no gradual buildup.
Wow, just boom.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like a mood slowly declining. It's like flipping a switch or like a sudden electrical surge. That suddenness is really key in distinguishing it.
That must be incredibly disorienting, like you said. So how does that surge actually, look in everyday life?
Well, it can kind of go in 2 very different directions typically. Sometimes this intense emotional reaction gets turned inward. When it's internalized, it can look for all the world like an instantaneous major depression.
Really? That severe?
Yeah, even including suicidal thoughts sometimes. A person can go from seeming perfectly okay one moment to feeling utterly despairing the next just because of a perceived criticism or rejection. And this, understandably, often leads to misdiagnosis because a clinician might see the depression but not recognize the triggered instantaneous nature of it.
Okay, that makes sense. And the other direction?
The other direction is when it's externalized, turned outward. This often presents as a rage that is directed at the person or situation that wounded them so terribly. The reaction feels disproportionate to the trigger, sudden and intense. And this, too, can lead to misdiagnosis sometimes as borderline personality disorder because the outbursts can seem so volatile.
Those are really powerful and potentially quite disruptive manifestations. How might this show up in terms of specific behaviors, like things parents might see in kids or things adults notice in themselves?
Right. So in a child, you might see really intense distress from even very gentle correction, or peer rejection that seems minor to others. For example, a teacher just suggesting, hey, maybe try this approach on the math problem could trigger a complete meltdown.
Okay.
They might start avoiding things, social situations, academic challenges because they're terrified of not being good enough. They might refuse to try out for the school play or apply for a certain program. You might hear repeated statements like, nobody likes me, or I'm just a failure. Oh, that's heartbreaking.
It really is. And in both kids and adults, you can see sudden emotional outbursts, or maybe the opposite, sudden withdrawal. Lots of negative self-talk.
Yeah.
And it definitely creates challenges in relationships, maybe self-sabotaging friendships or romantic partnerships, irrational jealousy, or just this constant fear of being hurt or abandoned.
Given how incredibly painful it sounds, it seems natural that people would try desperately to avoid anything that might trigger it. What kind of coping mechanisms do people with RSD tend to develop, even if they're not always the healthiest ones?
Exactly. Avoiding that pain becomes a huge driver. So people develop these really intense coping strategies to protect themselves. One common one is perfectionism or overachieving.
Trying to be bulletproof.
Precisely. Driven to be above reproach, to be the very best at everything they do. So maybe they check an email 15 times before sending it, not out of diligence, but out of this paralyzing fear that one tiny mistake will lead to devastating criticism. It might look successful from the outside, but internally it's described as an absolutely terrible, driven way in which to live. Yeah, sounds exhausting.
It is. Probably the most common response, though, according to Dr. Dodson, is becoming a people pleaser.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah, imagine constantly scanning everyone around you, trying to figure out what they want, what will make them approve, saying yes when you desperately want to say no, just to avoid even the imagined possibility of disapproval.
Yeah.
Because that disapproval feels like a physical blow.
Right.
It's this constant, exhausting performance, presenting a false self, often completely neglecting your own needs and feelings in the process.
And is there another common one?
Yes, and it's a really tough one. Simply giving up, just avoiding challenges altogether, not applying for that job, not asking someone out, not trying a new hobby, situations where rejection is even a possibility. The idea of being told no, the imagination of being told no is so frightening, so devastating that they just shut down and refuse to even try. The fear outweighs everything else.
Wow. Perfectionism, people-pleasing, or just opting out entirely. It really highlights how much this shapes behavior. But like you mentioned, some of these reactions, the sudden despair, the intense anger, can look like other things. How do we, or maybe more importantly, how does a clinician accurately distinguish RSD from, say, social anxiety or a mood disorder?
That's such a crucial question because misdiagnosis is really common. First, it's always worth repeating. RSD is currently seen as a symptom or a pattern strongly linked with ADHD and not its own formal diagnosis.
Right.
Now, when we compare it to something like social anxiety disorder or SAID, SAID is generally understood as a distinct fear of negative scrutiny in social settings, worrying about being judged. RSD takes that worry, potentially, but elevates it to the next level. It involves those unbearable feelings of pain triggered by rejection, whether it's real or just perceived.
Okay, so the pain is the key differentiator.
Yes, the intensity and the feeling of actual pain, often physical pain, is a big part of it. With SID, you might dread a party because you fear judgment. With RSD, a single, maybe even mildly critical comment at that party can feel like utter devastation, like a physical blow. It's that visceral, overwhelming pain response that sets it apart, though it can definitely get misdiagnosed as social phobia.
That makes the distinction clear. It's less about the fear of judgment and more about the agony of perceived judgment.
What about comparing it to mood disorders, like bipolar disorder? Both involve emotional swings, right?
They do, but the pattern is usually quite different. Here, the timing and the trigger are really the key things to look for. With typical mood disorders, like bipolar disorder, the mood shifts are often untriggered by a specific event. They tend to have a gradual onset developing over weeks to months. They last for a sustained period, usually at least 2 weeks for a depressive or manic episode, and they resolve gradually too. Think of it like a slow-moving weather front.
With RSD and the emotional swings in ADHD, it's almost the opposite. The mood changes are typically clearly triggered by an event, often related to perceived rejection or criticism. The onset is instantaneous, 0 to 100. The mood is congruent with the trigger, meaning the feeling makes sense in response to the trigger, even if the intensity is off the charts. And crucially, the episode is usually short-lived, lasting maybe minutes to a few hours, then resolving relatively quickly once the person feels reassured or the situation changes. It's more like a sudden, intense, but brief thunderstorm.
Triggered, instantaneous, congruent, short-lived. That's a really helpful framework. And what about trauma? Could a lifetime of negative feedback or difficult experiences cause RSD, or does it just make it worse?
That's a really important and nuanced point. Living with untreated ADHD often involves a lifetime of negative feedback, misunderstandings, and difficulties. Stuff like being called lazy or not trying hard enough.
Yeah.
Those experiences can absolutely be traumatic in their own right. And that accumulated pain and negative self-concept can certainly worsen RSD symptoms. It makes the sensitivity even more raw. However, the current understanding is that RSD is primarily a brain-based neurological feature of ADHD. It's an innate predisposition. So trauma doesn't cause RSD, but difficult life experiences, especially those related to the challenges of ADHD itself, can definitely exacerbate it. The underlying sensitivity is thought to be there from the start.
Okay, that clarifies the relationship. So we've got a clearer picture of what RSD is, its roots in the ADHD brain, and how it differs from other conditions. Now, the really practical part. How do we navigate these intense emotional storms? What support and strategies actually help? Let's maybe start with parents trying to support their kids.
Absolutely. For parents, the number one thing is validation. Even if the trigger seems tiny or illogical to you, the feeling your child is experiencing is huge and very real to them.
Right. Don't dismiss the feeling.
Exactly. Start by acknowledging it. Wow, I can see that really hurt your feelings. Or, it makes total sense you feel upset right now. This simple validation communicates empathy, helps them feel seen and understood rather than judged or dismissed, which can just escalate things.
That makes so much sense. Accepting their reality first. What else?
Use gentle, specific language. Focus on the behavior, not their character. So instead of saying you're being rude, try something like, I noticed your voice got really loud just then, and it made it hard for me to understand you. Can we try saying that again, a bit calmer?
Okay. Focusing on the observable action.
Yes. And also, help them name the feeling. It sounds like maybe you're feeling really embarrassed and hurt right now. Many kids, especially with ADHD and RSD, get overwhelmed by the intensity but don't know what they're feeling. Giving it a name, sad, angry, frustrated, embarrassed, rejected, is incredibly empowering. It gives them a tool for self-understanding and communication.
Naming it to tame it, kind of. Are there proactive things parents can do too to maybe prepare for these surges?
Definitely. Being proactive helps a lot. You can prepare for tricky situations, preview potential outcomes, maybe even rehearse coping strategies before a challenging event. Like if you know sharing toys at a playdate might be tough, talk beforehand about how they might feel if another child takes a toy and what they could do besides yelling.
Role-playing almost.
Exactly. And also create recovery routines. After an episode happens, help them develop their own go-to toolkit for soothing themselves. Maybe it's a quiet corner with soft blankets, listening to a specific playlist, using a weighted lap pad, or squeezing putty. Having a plan for after the storm hits is important too.
That sounds really helpful.
And maybe the most important thing underneath all of this is consistency and reassurance. Communicate your expectations clearly and calmly, and explicitly remind them often that they are loved and valued no matter how big their feelings get. That underlying security is crucial.
Those are wonderful, really compassionate strategies for parents. What about for adults who are navigating RSD themselves? What can they do to cope when that emotional wave hits?
For adults, a really critical first step is learning to challenge that harsh, negative self-talk. RSD feels an incredibly vicious inner critic.
Oh, yeah.
So you need to actively identify those limiting core beliefs. I'm a failure, nobody likes me, I always mess up, and then actively look for evidence that contradicts them. It's hard work, but crucial. Remember that old saying, no one is judging you as harshly as you judge yourself? It's often true, especially with RSD.
So becoming a bit of a detective for positive evidence about yourself.
Exactly. And part of that is making a deliberate habit of recalling your triumphs. Think about past moments when you persisted in the face of fear or overcame a challenge. You've actually survived everything life has thrown at you up to this point. Those past successes are real proof of your resilience. Maybe even keep a list, a win jar or something to look at when you're feeling low.
I like that, a win jar. What else?
Identify your strengths. What are you good at? What do you genuinely enjoy or feel passionate about? Focus on those things. Turn them into positive affirmations you can repeat to yourself, like, I am brave, I am creative, I am capable. Also, mindfulness and reframing are huge. Practicing self-awareness, just noticing your emotions rise without immediate judgment. Observing them like clouds passing.
Just noticing, not reacting instantly.
Right. And then actively working on reframing negative thoughts. If you think, they didn't answer my text, they must be mad at me, consciously practice generating alternative, more neutral or positive interpretations. Maybe they're busy. Maybe their phone died. Maybe they just haven't seen it yet.
Okay, that takes practice, I imagine. Are there any sort of quick tools or acronyms people can use right in the heat of the moment?
Yeah, there are a couple of handy ones. One is QTIP, which stands for Quit Taking It Personally.
Okay.
Yeah.
QTIP.
It's easy to remember. It's a reminder to pause and consider the source. Is this really about you? Or is the other person stressed, having a bad day, or just communicating poorly? It helps create a little distance. Another one is STAR.
To STAR.
Yeah, STAR. Stop, think, act, recover. So when you feel that surge starting, stop. Just pause, take a breath, think. Try to accurately gauge the situation. Is the threat real? What are my options? Act. Choose a response, hopefully a calm one, and then recover. Give yourself time and space to manage the emotional aftermath. Use those soothing strategies we talked about.
Stop, think, act, recover. That's very practical.
It is. And another big piece is learning to embrace your sensitivity, maybe even reframe it as a strength. Instead of, I'm too sensitive, try, I am sensitive, which means I feel things deeply and can connect with people in special ways. Surround yourself with supportive, understanding people, trusted friends, family, maybe a support group, and practice self-compassion. Treat yourself with the same care and kindness you'd offer a friend, or as one source put it, like a child with a skinned knee, be gentle with yourself.
Those are all incredibly valuable, actionable steps for managing things day to day. But, like you said earlier, sometimes these strategies might not feel like enough on their own, especially when an episode hits so hard. What about professional support? Therapy, medication?
You're right. Sometimes more support is needed. When it comes to therapy, it's important to understand something specific about RSD. Traditional therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, or dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, while helpful for many things, including general emotional regulation skills, often don't prevent or relieve an RSD episode once it's already triggered.
Because it happens too fast.
Exactly. It's so sudden and overwhelming, it bypasses the rational thinking skills those therapies rely on in the moment. It's like trying to reason with a smoke alarm while the house is on fire. However, a therapy approach called acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, especially when modified for ADHD, has shown some real promise. It focuses more on accepting difficult feelings and committing to values-based actions rather than trying to eliminate the feelings immediately, helping people relate to their intense emotions differently.
Okay, so ACT might be more helpful for the experience itself. What about medication? You mentioned earlier it can act like emotional armor.
Yes, that emotional armor description comes up a lot from patients. Right now, medications are considered the only treatment proven to help manage the intensity of RSD episodes consistently, largely because they are there all the time, providing a sort of baseline level of regulation.
So they help make that sieve mesh finer, so to speak.
That's a great way to think about it. The first-line medications often recommended specifically for RSD are a class called alpha agonists. These include guanfacine and clonidine.
And those aren't stimulants, right?
Correct, they're non-stimulants. They work differently by essentially helping to calm down an overactive sympathetic nervous system, the body's stress response system. This helps regulate those intense emotional reactions. Studies and clinical experience suggest they can significantly relieve RSD symptoms for about 60% of individuals who try them.
60% is pretty significant.
It is, and patients often describe the effect just like that armor metaphor. They might still notice a potential trigger, like a critical comment, but it doesn't wound them in the same way. It glances off. It's also important to know that these medications take time to work things. The benefits usually take about 5 days to become noticeable after starting or changing a dose.
Good to know it's not instant. What about the standard ADHD stimulant medications? Do they help with RSD too?
That's a common question. While stimulants definitely help with core ADHD symptoms like focus, impulsivity, and general inhibition, the picture with emotional regulation and RSD is a bit less clear. In fact, one recent study specifically indicated that stimulants did not normalize or reverse the deficits in emotion induction and regulation in adults with ADHD.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So while they are crucial for managing many aspects of ADHD, they might not directly target the specific emotional intensity of RSD in the same way the alpha agonists seem to.
Okay. Are there other medication options?
For clinicians with specific expertise, another class of medications called MAOIs, or monoamine oxidase inhibitors, can be very effective off-label. They work on different neurotransmitters and can help both ADHD symptoms and the emotional components. However, they come with significant dietary restrictions and potential drug interactions, so they require very careful management by an experienced doctor.
Right. Definitely something needing expert guidance.
Yeah.
You also touched on hormones earlier. How much do they play into this emotional regulation picture?
They play a huge role, especially for women. Hormones, particularly estrogen, have a profound effect on neurotransmitter systems involved in mood and emotional regulation. Many women with ADHD experience much more severe premenstrual dysphoric disorder, PMDD, for example, and menopause, which involves a significant drop in estrogen, can dramatically impact ADHD symptoms and even medication effectiveness. Some women report their stimulant medication suddenly feels like it stopped working when they enter menopause, sometimes until they start hormone replacement therapy. It really highlights how interconnected our biology, hormones, and emotional experiences are, and why treatment often needs a holistic view.
Wow, that's complex, but so important to consider. This has been incredibly insightful, really unpacking RSD. It just underscores how valuable it is to simply understand this experience.
It really does. Just knowing it has a name, knowing you're not alone, and crucially, knowing that you're not broken or flawed, that can be incredibly powerful. It's often the very first step towards seeking the right kind of support and starting to manage this really intense aspect of ADHD.
So you've just taken a deep dive with us into rejection sensitive dysphoria. We've looked at its intense, often painful connection to ADHD and how deeply it can impact daily life. We've seen it's not some kind of personal failing, but a neurological reality, and importantly, one that actually has pathways for support and management.
And we heard earlier that people with ADHD often lead intense, passionate lives. Their highs are higher, their lows are lower. So if RSD makes even normal, universal discomfort feel unbearable and has such a profound effect on self-esteem and relationships, maybe ask yourself, what's one small, gentle step you could take this week based on what we've talked about?
Yeah, maybe it's just consciously validating your child's intense feeling, even if you don't quite get it.
Yeah.
Or maybe practicing that STAR method, stop, think, act, recover for yourself just once. Or perhaps simply reaching out to a trusted friend or family member to share something you learned today.
Small steps. And maybe consider this final thought. We mentioned that source material saying, when patients respond well to medication, they often come to realize the errors I was protected from were not errors to begin with.
That's powerful.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
What arrows in your own life, when you look at them through this new lens of understanding RSD and ADHD, and maybe with the right support, might actually turn out to be something entirely different, something less threatening, less sharp than you first perceived.